Right, well, let's talk about Jimmy Carter's legacy in a bit more detail. Joe Siracusa joins me now from Perth in Australia. He's a professor of security and diplomacy at Curtin University in Australia. Carter then has faced some criticism on the domestic front, but surely one triumph of his tenure was the Camp David Accords between the Israelis and the Arab state of Egypt in 1978. Just take us back. Why was this so important? And given everything that's going on in the world now, Joe, what can we learn from this effort spearheaded by Jimmy Carter?
Good afternoon, Charlotte. Well, look, in 1978, he hosted a 14-day negotiation between the president of Egypt, Anwar el-Sadat, and the right-wing leader of Israel, Menachem Begin, who were very anxious to get out of their own political corners at home, as a matter of fact. I mean, Sadat was trying to get the Israelis to leave the Sinai, and he was looking for some way to stay in power because he had a lot of people undermining him. Begin, of course, had replaced Rabin, who was looking for a more moderate approach, and they decided to visit each other's cities, Jerusalem and Cairo, and they couldn't agree on everything. So President Carter, and this is very courageous, he decided to take the Middle Eastern negotiations and put them back in the Oval Office. Up to that time, Charlotte, pretty much by special negotiators and the State Department. As you recall, as you may know, President Henry Kissinger had done a lot of shuttle diplomacy in the Middle East, much to no avail. Anyway, there were two major agreements cut at the Camp David. One was a lasting peace, to which the UN vetoed because the PLO, or the Palestinian Authority, wasn't invited. The Palestinians weren't invited. And the second one was a negotiation or a framework for a settlement a year later, in which the Israelis got out of Sinai in exchange for the president of Egypt's acceptance of Israel as an independent power. And I might add, he was on the outer for 10 years with the Arab League because he decided to go his own way instead of leading the Arab world. So he took a lot of chances there. And as you know, a couple of years later, he was assassinated for this very effort. But anyway, Carter went on to write an important book, which I've quoted on this show before, I think in 2006, though he thought about it for a generation, and that was that without a Palestinian homeland, there's only apartheid. There was no choice. You had to have a homeland, and it didn't have to be. It wasn't supposed to be cobbled out of the West Bank and Gaza. It was supposed to be something onto their own. So he was a light in a place where there was a lot of darkness. So when people say to me, the Americans were caught off guard by events in the Middle East in the last couple of years, they're not paying attention here, because Jimmy Carter had a laser eye view on all this. He knew what the problem was in the 1970s, and he worked all of his life to straighten it out. So when it didn't go our way, the Americans have themselves to blame for putting their money on the wrong horse.
And Carter, perhaps a little bit like Biden of late, has also faced a belligerent Russia, USSR as it was back then. How effectively did he respond to that? And do you think both presidents were taken a little bit by surprise by Russian presidents?
Well, there's no doubt about it. Jimmy Carter was edging sort of to a new kind of détente, a rapprochement with Russia, which sort of just struggled through the Watergate years and Henry Kissinger's policy. And then in 1980, the Russians double-crossed him, that is, he thought so, by invading Afghanistan. And so what he decided to do was to double down, increase the American budget, ask for NATO members to contribute more, introduce short-range missiles into Europe, and I think he also canceled American participation in the Olympics. So he took a very hard view, and he felt betrayed by Russian diplomacy or by the Russian leadership. And so in that way, he was surprised. The thing is that the Biden people are not really on the same playing field, because they shouldn't be as surprised as he was. I mean, I think Jimmy Carter got genuinely blindsided, whereas the Biden people refused to do much about Russia before or after Ukraine.
perhaps some lessons learned then. All right, Joe Siracusa from Perth in Australia, many thanks for joining us on the News Hour.
Thank you.